The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran, a struggle that threatens to redraw the geopolitical map and plunge the world into chaos. But amid this turmoil, a surprising and powerful voice has emerged from the heart of Africa. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president of Burkina Faso, has delivered a message that challenges the world's silence and calls for urgent peace and justice. What makes his words so striking? Why does a leader from West Africa matter in a conflict thousands of miles away? Stay with us as we unpack Traoré's bold stance, the stakes of this volatile conflict, and what it means for all of us. To truly understand the significance of Ibrahim Traoré's message, we must first step back and examine the volatile landscape into which it was delivered. The tensions between Israel and Iran have been steadily intensifying for years, fueled by espionage, proxy warfare, and a deeply rooted ideological divide. Israel views Iran as an existential threat, particularly due to Tehran's nuclear ambitions and its support of militant groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran, in turn, sees Israel, and by extension, the West, as aggressors bent on dominating the Middle East. These tensions have boiled over repeatedly, from cyber attacks and targeted assassinations to airstrikes in Syria and shadow wars on the high seas. And now the possibility of open war looms larger than ever. Into this geopolitical tinderbox steps an unlikely figure, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old interim president of Burkina Faso. His country is thousands of miles away from the epicenter of the Iran-Israel conflict, yet he sees no borders when it comes to the consequences of global war. Burkina Faso has its own crises: rampant terrorism, economic hardship, and political instability. But for Traoré, these struggles do not justify silence. On the contrary, they reinforce his belief that Africa, often dismissed as a passive observer on the world stage, must rise and speak. Why does his voice matter? Because it breaks a pattern. Traditionally, African leaders have been expected to remain quiet or align with one of the dominant global blocs. Traoré disrupts this norm. He positions Africa not as a pawn in a geopolitical chess game, but as a sovereign continent with its own principles and perspectives. When he warns that global instability will inevitably spill into Africa, he speaks not from theory, but from the lived experience of a continent that has often borne the brunt of wars it didn't start. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's speech on the Israel-Iran conflict was not just a political address, it was a moral indictment of the global system that continues to normalize war. Delivered with clarity and conviction, his message rippled through diplomatic circles and captured the attention of those weary of watching the world lurch from one crisis to another. Standing at a podium in Ouagadougou, far from Tel Aviv or Tehran, Traoré spoke as if the bombs were falling just beyond his own doorstep. Because in many ways they are. The economic shocks, the displacement of people, the rising cost of food and fuel, these are not regional issues. They are global aftershocks, and Africa is feeling the tremors. At the core of his speech was a demand for humanity. He refused to take sides in a binary narrative that paints one state as good and the other as evil. Instead, Traoré called for an end to the cycle of vengeance and war. The battlefield of the Middle East must not become the battlefield of the world, he declared, a line that has since been shared across social media and picked up by independent news outlets. His words echoed the sentiment of millions who feel powerless as their leaders fan the flames of conflict for political gain. Traoré did not mince words. We stand with the innocent, whether in Gaza, in Tehran, or in Tel Aviv. No child should grow up beneath rockets. No mother should bury her child because adults have forgotten how to talk. What makes this speech particularly powerful is its emotional weight. Traoré is not a career diplomat. He is a soldier who has seen the cost of war. His message, grounded in both realism and idealism, is a challenge to the world. To rediscover its moral compass before it's too late. To appreciate the depth and implications of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's speech, we must place it in the broader historical and geopolitical context. This was not merely an African leader commenting on a Middle Eastern crisis. It was a revolutionary voice challenging the very architecture of global power. Traoré's words resonate because they emerge from a unique intersection. A nation under siege from terrorism, a continent often sidelined in international diplomacy, and a leader who is both young and unapologetically anti-imperialist. His message exposes the double standards of global politics, where powerful nations fuel conflicts in the name of national interest, while others suffer in silence. Traoré's appeal is deeply rooted in a Pan-African ideology that draws from the legacies of leaders like Thomas Sankara and Patrice Lumumba. His condemnation of proxy wars and neo-colonial interference reflects a growing trend among African states seeking to redefine their relationships with former colonial powers and global hegemonies. By warning against the spread of the Israel-Iran conflict into Africa, Traoré is highlighting a reality that is rarely acknowledged in mainstream discourse, that the ripple effects of war do not respect borders. Food insecurity, mass migration, and the radicalization of youth are already impacting countries like Burkina Faso, and any escalation in the Middle East would only exacerbate these crises. What makes Traoré's position even more significant is its challenge to the silence of others. In a world where many leaders are beholden to economic or political alliances, Traoré's forthrightness is startling. He has aligned Burkina Faso with alternative powers like Russia and Turkey, and he's unafraid to critique Western influence. Yet his speech is not about taking sides in a new Cold War. It's about calling for peace, sovereignty, and the protection of innocent lives. In doing so, he invites the world to think not in terms of allies and enemies, but in terms of what is right and just. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré addressed the Israel-Iran conflict, he did more than speak geopolitics. He pulled back the veil on the true cost of war, human suffering. In a world where news cycles move faster than missiles and headlines favor statistics over stories, Traoré's message was a stark reminder that behind every explosion, behind every retaliatory strike, there are families shattered, dreams buried, and futures erased. His words asked the global community to remember that war is not a chess game for generals or politicians. It is a tragedy for the people trapped in its shadow. Whether it is a family huddled in fear in Gaza, a child bleeding in southern Lebanon, or a mother mourning in an Iranian village, the pain is universal. The human toll of the escalating conflict is immense. In Gaza, thousands of civilians have died, entire neighborhoods flattened, and hospitals turned into morgues. In Iran, economic sanctions, cyber attacks, and assassinations have left scars not only on the state, but on everyday citizens. In Israel, fear of missile strikes and the loss of civilian lives have left communities in mourning. These are not faceless populations. They are people like us, working, loving, raising children, until war turned them into statistics. Traoré's emphasis on this shared humanity cuts through the polarizing narratives that dominate international dialogue. The innocent must not pay for leaders' ambition, he declared. It is a line that speaks to our collective conscience. What makes Traoré's stance deeply moral is that he refuses to allow ideology to override empathy. While many leaders align themselves with blocs, he aligns with the voiceless. He doesn't speak in abstractions. He names the dead, the displaced, the desperate. And in doing so, he urges the world to do something radical, to feel. Because without that feeling of outrage, of compassion, of shared pain, peace is impossible. His speech dares us to stop being numb. In a world saturated with images of war, we've grown accustomed to watching conflict unfold like a film, spectators often helpless, sometimes numb. But Ibrahim Traoré's message does something unusual. It shifts the burden from governments alone to every one of us. He does not speak only to presidents or generals. He speaks to people, to students, workers, parents, activists, and the silent millions who scroll past footage of bombed-out schools and crying children. His words challenge us not to look away. The battlefield of the Middle East must not become the battlefield of the world, he warns. That battlefield, he implies, isn't just physical, it's moral, and we're all standing on it. So what can we do? The answer starts with reflection. Are we passively consuming the news or actively questioning what we see and hear? Are we amplifying voices for peace or simply sharing outrage that fades with the next headline? Traoré calls on us to break the cycle, not through violence, but through awareness, conversation, and collective pressure, demanding that our leaders prioritize diplomacy over dominance, supporting journalists, educators, and humanitarian workers who bring truth and aid where it's needed most. Donating, if we can, to organizations on the ground. And above all, refusing to let apathy be our default. We live in a time when silence is no longer neutral. Silence in the face of suffering becomes complicity. Traoré reminds us that even those far from the battlefield are affected by its tremors. Economies falter, refugees flee, tensions cross borders. In this interconnected world, peace must be everyone's responsibility. His speech is not a conclusion, it's a beginning. It invites each of us to find our voice, to resist the seduction of indifference, and to remember, being informed is not enough. We must also be engaged. As the world teeters on the edge of another catastrophic conflict and powerful nations beat the drums of war with calculated precision, one man in a landlocked African nation dares to imagine something different. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's message is not only a condemnation of violence, it is a call for a new moral order, a world where leadership is measured not by the strength of one's arsenal, but by the courage to speak for the voiceless. A world where sovereignty doesn't mean silence, but solidarity. And most of all, a world where Africa, long treated as a stage for foreign ambitions, stands up and says, "We are not spectators in this global theater. We are actors, leaders, and guardians of justice." Traoré's voice is the voice of a generation rising, not bound by Cold War loyalties, not seduced by propaganda, but rooted in truth, clarity, and conscience. When he speaks, it's not with the polished cadence of a diplomat, but with the raw urgency of a soldier who has seen enough blood. His message cuts through the fog of misinformation and geopolitical chess, and it reminds us of something we desperately need to hear. War is not destiny, it is a choice, and peace is not weakness, it is the highest act of strength. So as you finish watching this video, ask yourself, what kind of world do you want to live in? One where fear rules and silence enables, or one where voices like Traoré's are amplified, echoed, and answered with action? Because this isn't just about Israel, or Iran, or Burkina Faso. It's about all of us. The future is not written, but it is spoken, sometimes by the most unexpected voices. And if we choose to listen, perhaps we can still change its course. As we've seen today, Captain Ibrahim Traoré's message cuts through the noise of power struggles and reminds us of what truly matters: the lives caught in the crossfire and the urgent need for peace. This conflict isn't just about borders or politics, it's about humanity. Now the question is, what role will you play? Will you be a passive observer or an active voice for change? The future of our world depends not only on leaders, but on all of us who refuse to stay silent. If this message moved you, share it, discuss it, and let's keep the conversation alive. Because in a time of conflict, awareness and action can be the first steps toward a better tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and stay informed.